let's see. Now everything should be fine. My audio should be working, but I'm just gonna check anyways. I have a bit of a headache, but hopefully that shouldn't really affect me all that much. It should go away. Yeah, I'm only up on Twitch. Yep, okay. Just so Twitch doesn't take away my affiliate right away. And everything seems to be working just fine. No, though. Let me try to use my model and see if that brings up my OBS usage, like CPU usage up. Because by the way, it's been like a week since the last stream. It's because I streamed Crisis Core original, and then I got sick for like 3 days. I couldn't stream. And I was like, you know what? Yeah, let's go. I have the energy to do it. And then OBS just decided to take him massive shit. And even today, I was trying to stream like in the morning. I was like, you know, fuck it, let me try to stream. But then my OBS just didn't accept my mic audio for some reason. So I was like, okay, whatever. And now it's working for whatever reason. There we go. Let me clean my glasses. Also, by the way, I'm not planning on reading this for like 6 to 9 hours just because I don't want to lose my voice. Because the smart way I've seen people play these games or like read these visual novels while doing content is by just reading it there in their head and then leaving it up for other people to read and then continue and talk about what happens. Now that is the smart thing to do. That is what I'm not gonna do. I'm going to read the lines. Because I'm starting this because I want to get better at reading out loud. Like that is a skill set that I lost just because I stopped doing that. I stopped like recording things, like scripting things and reading them out loud, so I lost that skill. So this is kind of a way to get that back, and also at the same time, get into the series and actually stick with it. Since I really, it's because of my ADHD, I drop shit a lot. But I feel like if I have it on stream, I want to continue it. I want to finish it. So that's why I'm just like, yeah, fuck it. Stream it and see what happens. I'm just gonna sit here for a bit to see if nothing happens to the bitrate. Where's the model? There it is. Up. Hi. Where am I? There I am. Yeah. Dude, why is it slow, though? Yeah, I might not be able to use the model today. Which is a bit of a shame. What is increasing my CPU usage today? Yeah, OBS is using like 30% when usually like it's at 14. I don't know why this is happening. Oh well. I'll just hope that everything will be fine. Let me just delete as many resources as I can. and hope that fixes it somehow. What's this? Oh, it's the 14 chat cover. Let's delete that. Oh, nope. Delete that. I had that when I streamed fucking Romancing Saga 1. Alerts are on. Oh, it's that image. No, I'm good. Name's good. What's this? Oh. Oh, I almost forgot that's there. Okay, everything should be good. Let me drink my tea before it goes cold. I read like the prologue of this game. I don't know what the prologue is, but just the beginning part. Just because I wanted to see if it would be any good, like to do on stream, and it seemed fine. So I'm excited to do this. Yeah, everything's good. It's a good thing I found this song just by like searching relaxing Tsukihime music, and that was like one of the first results. So I was like, ah, nice. I've been listening to it on repeat for a couple of hours. When next I want to do something, what was it? Oh yeah. Okay. There we go. Everything seems to be good now, yeah. Though I forgot to check the audio for my like console capture, like audio capture. It was a winter day 8 years prior to when already messed it up. It was a winter day 8 years prior when it happened. That solemn morning when she understood the value of life for the very first time. Oh god, I messed up. There we go. Her home was nestled on the side of a mountain. Around it was nothing but inhospitable wilderness. She had no neighbors or childhood friend to speak of. Things like traveling to school or playing outside were more trouble than they ought to be. Indeed, with its pure water and bright stars, it was a place rich with memories, both frustrating and... I need to look this word up. I read it when testing and I don't know what the fuck it means. It is the very first time I've seen this word. I like fucking visual novels because every now and then someone will post an image on Twitter and be like, oh my god, look at this, this amazing sentence. It is so raw and there's like 5 words I've never heard of. Like, I've never seen like anyone type those words out. So, then I had been a time in the past that was idyllically happy and peaceful. Okay. That was only during summer though. Winters in those mountains were extremely frigid, each morning more severe than the last. Her father would drive her to the train station. After waiting 10 minutes for the engine to warm up and the ice over windows to be clear, her father would savor his morning coffee, leaving her to venture outside and rev the engine. Out the front door she would go, traversing the garden with icy breath until she reached that also done. As always, she inserted the key that started the ignition, the engine rumbled to life. Just as she proudly finished that humble task she's done so many times before. This fucked me up. I didn't think they'd do this early. A shrill scream pierced the air. She knew, even though it wasn't human, that the feeble sound was a cry of agony. A few moments passed. Her father came out and opened the hood of the car. Creaking fan belts, a monstrous-looking engine, and something that didn't belong. Yeah, I read this like today, and I was like, "Oh, we're just turning off with this, okay." I thought like it would take a bit until we get to something like this. There was a cat, a mother by the looks of it, and her 2 kittens. The 3 cats had been huddling for warmth in the engine's compartment. The mother cat was missing its head. One of the kittens had been mangled beyond recognition by the engine belts and surely died instantly. The other kitten, its face half covered in blood, panted faintly. So, I'm just gonna shut down my model. For some reason, OBS is dying. Sure, let's have this on for now. It doesn't belong to its mother, rather the chunk of meat that was its mother, with the last bit of its life it could muster. Her father lamented their plight. The previous night had been especially cold. After he had returned home yesterday, the cats must have snuck under the hood, drawn by the warmth of the engine. They had slept next to the engine and awoken to a storm of spinning belts. Cars in the 80s were not sealed particularly well, so this was not unheard of. Her father's voice seemed distant. She could only make out a small tuft of the kitten's grey fur. The rest of it was caked in the blood of its mother and brother. I can see its skull. The fragile life of a speckled kitten. Trembling and possibly blind, it continues to nuzzle against its dead mother's chest. She took the kitten into her arms and ran deep into the mountains to her grandfather's house. Was it because she was overcome with regret? Or was it the shock of grief? Years later, she still wasn't sure. Fighting back the welling tears, she burst into her grandfather's workshop. Her grandfather was a magician who could do anything. She had never seen magic. She knew the magic that was a fantasy straight out of fairy tales. But so was her grandfather. She had to find him. He was the only one who could help.
その子
Marilyn?
猫の運命を変えろという。
The cave-dwelling magician said indifferently. This kid needs our help, she pleaded. Whether it was a simple task or Herculean labor, her grandfather would not say. He simply granted the girl's childish wish, like a machine. I'm gonna guess her grandfather isn't a real person and it's a computer? Maybe? I don't know. So they're just like in this fucking like fantasy room. Oh no, the girl said. Before she knew it, however, she was holding a tiny corpse in her hands. Its fur was cold. The warmth of life had left his body, and the tears she had fought so hard to hold back poured from her eyes. Regret spread through her chest like an endless gray sky.
トローだったな。結局元に戻すとは。
Her mind struggled to come to grips with what had just occurred. The last 10 minutes were a total blank. Was she mad? Was she had known? Was as all if it never happened? The only thing she was sure of was that life, once extinguished, can never return.
そこに誰か。
That day, it was her mistake that gave birth to me. Indeed, whatever occurred that day, it was a day of nostalgia and longing. This is the fairy tale of 8 years ago, the day they first met, that no magic can ever bring back. I so badly want to know what the fuck that means. So like I like reading while still kind of sick. It's not great. Let me clear my throat. I'm gonna mute for a sec. So for some reason there's a big delay. Let me update that. There we go. Arrogant, greedy, and able only to destroy. I must be a wolf. I don't have regrets. There's no looking back. If my pride has left you behind, my sincere condolences. But at any rate, I suppose it's my fate to die at the hands of Little Red Riding Hood. It was a quiet morning. From her bed she could see the sky was an ashen watercolor gray. The thermometer displayed 43 degrees Fahrenheit, a rather unforgiving temperature for November. Her stomach woke up with a growl, pathetically reminding her that she had completely missed breakfast. But lazy mornings like today were... But lazy mornings like today's were for her a blessing. It was already past 8 in the morning. On any ordinary weekday, tardiness would be unavoidable, but today, classes were cancelled in commemoration of the school's anniversary. Gratefully, she had every intention of taking it easy for the first time in ages. Okay, wait a second, something has been bothering me on my fucking screen this whole time, which is why I've been stuttering so fucking much. Let me fix this. Since I'm not using the model, I can get comfortable. Wait a sec. Okay, wait. There we go, now I'm more in the mood to do this. Okay. Outside the window was a gloomy grey, and it reminded her more of the evening than morning. It wasn't a pleasant morning by any stretch of the imagination, but having been up all night, until just 3 hours ago, she couldn't care less about the weather outside. All she cared about was more sleep. As long as she could spend her morning in bed, what was happening outside was of no concern to her. She shut the curtains. Thank you for telling me. Then closed her eyes and tried to let sleep reclaim her.
せめてあと2時間ぐらいは凡庸な夢を見ていられますように。
Oh, I love her voice. A blissful slumber found her soon enough. Her consciousness faded. However, her simple request would be mercilessly refused. Man, I felt this today. I really felt this today. She's just like me. A faint but shrill sound lingering in her ears. It was the unmistakable ring of a telephone. Much to her... What the fuck is that? I'll just have fucking Google on this, open on the side for this whole stream. What the fuck does that word mean? Annoyance or distress at having failed or been humiliated. Okay. Much to her chagrin. Chagrin? And how the fuck do you say that word? I don't know. Out of habit, her eyes popped open.
日に限って
The telephone was suitable. Was situated in the foyer on the first floor. As her went walking down a 30-foot corridor and going down the flight of stairs, I felt this. In her sleep-deprived state, that distance seemed somewhere between incredibly far and astronomically far. The phone's incessant ringing continued. She knew the call would eventually give up if she ignored it, but she chose to fight the urge.
アリス出ないの
She thought her housemate would get it, but she soon had abandoned all hope. The realization stuck that her housemate did not have the day off from school, but was likely in class at her prestigious little Hilltops Academy. The caller proved the incredibly persistent. Their persistence made the volume of the ringing seem even louder.
もうせっかくの安眠を
I really feel this. I was so tired today. I've been up for 24 hours and I was trying to go to bed and someone just kept calling me. And I wanted to kill them. She was left with no choice but to get up, throw a top on and leave the room.
うわ寒
She rubbed her hands together to warm up her numb fingers. The mansion's heating system wasn't inadequate, to say the least. Which meant that winter was the very worst of invited guests. Nevermore. Never more so than on a dreary morning as this, when one didn't need to use a thermometer to know how cold it was. The mansion sat in the mountains and was surrounded by dense forest. Winter always arriving here first before moving on to nearby towns. The robotic ring of the telephone reverberated throughout the long hallway. The mansion's furnishing had been so perfectly maintained that it made the place feel unlived. It seemed lonelier than it did splendid. Coupled with the dreary morning, it could have passed for a haunted house.
ま、幽霊屋敷そのものだけど、だいたい2人で住むには広すぎるのよ、この家。
She counted more than 30 rings since it first began. The caller either had a lot of free time on their hands or had a good understanding of a house's circumstances. She had a strong hunch that it was the latter. The window above looked out onto a gloomy sky. She had hastened to catch the unrelenting ring in the act as soon as possible, though she had a feeling that her happy morning might come to a close the moment she caught it. It's her job calling her in on a day off. Just say, hey, we might need you. It was here that the series of incidents began. Apologies for the lack of romance to this tale. For whether it be objectively true or merely supposition, it is always from gloomy and assuming beginnings that extraordinary events are set into motion. Yo, let's go. Good thing I'm playing this as Nasu intended on a 4K TV. I was reading this on my screen, on like my monitor, like my main monitor, but since I'm not using the model, I can just use my TV. Hopefully that'll help me to be able to read better, since I can actually like trace the words. What does the word morale mean? You know, I should be like one of those people who are like, hey, if you want to read them in Echo, you should like have a notebook ready. I should just write down like every single thing that happens and be like, oh my god, what could this mean? When they'll tell me in like two more hours of reading. I gotta say, Nasu games have good music. I'd say game, but this one is like especially not a game. Since I don't believe this one has routes, if I remember correctly from what a friend told me. Yo, it's this shot that I kept seeing. Let's go. Yeah, I could leave this song on repeat for like 10 hours. The rain had subdued somewhat by the time she reached the school gate. Gotta say, yeah, it is easier to read on my TV. It's like my brain has time to actually like think about it and process what is like written out instead of just like adding shit to it so I can finish the sentence faster. Sunlight seemed to be playing peekaboo behind the clouds in the distance. It looked like it might be cleared up by early afternoon.
と言っても、私には関係のない話だけど。
The weather reflected her luck. On top of being forced out of the house at such an early hour, she had to suffer through a winter rain. I'm getting a bad feeling about this. The sinking feeling she had only grew as she passed through the entrance and headed inside. She didn't encounter any other students along the way, nor did she see anyone taking part in any club activities. The reception desk to the faculty room simply read, "Faculty closed." The school had given all of its students the day off, except those explicitly summoned, like her. A fact that irked her more and more as the minutes passed. She opened the door to the faculty room and headed towards the desk she had visited a number of times before. The man at the desk wore a plain shirt and a suit that were nonetheless neatly pressed. Slim framed glasses adorned his face, giving off an amicable yet cunning air. The mild-mannered image of this mid-20s man presented clash with the cigarette he smoked. He didn't appear to have noticed her yet.
Yamashiro-sensei.
I think my mic picked up that audio bit, so I might have to move a bit away, like a little bit away from the mic. She closed the door with a bang, showing no response to the sudden sound. Mr. Yamashiro lifted his head.
Yeah, ohayo, Aozaki-kun. 要件は聞いているかな?
はい。1時間前に自宅
The
で
game is
事
kinda
前
loud.
に何の相談もなく
I might have to turn it down eventually. Having graduated from this high school himself, Mr. Yamashiro was not much older than the rest of the students. For that reason, the students preferred him with the other teachers. He always had something interesting to talk about and kept conversations casual. In fact, he seemed more like an older student than a teacher, but she unfortunately didn't share her fellow students' fondness for him. She was of the opinion that teachers should come across as more austere, whatever that word means. Like an iron fist that could inspire both love and hate in equal measure. Not a buddy to joke and pal around with. He was the exact opposite of how she had felt a teacher should be. It was only natural that her manner towards him would be forced and unfriendly. Okay, so what are the chances of him being either a murderer or a pedo? I'd say it's about like 50-50. I'm gonna go with the former. Hopefully, and I hope. It's not the latter. Not that she'd ever been wired to make friendly small talk.
今日もご機嫌斜めみたいだね、君は。
それは先生の気のせいです。今日だけ特別という話ではありませんから。
The matter-of-fact answer perfectly matched the displeasure displayed on her face. Her bad mood from having to get up early and the tiredness from staying out late must have collectively made her look positively adversarial. Sure.
ならいいんだけどね。彼にはそう辛く当たらないでくれよ。僕らじゃ正直どう扱っていいかわからないところもあるし。
先生、その件ですけど、私まだ詳しい話を聞かされていないのですが。
As Mr. Yamashiro met her piercing eyes, he finally understood the reason behind her tone and slowly put out his cigarettes.
電話じゃあなんて聞いたの？
転入生の紹介をするとだけです。理由も脈絡もない説明でした。
One of Mr. Yamashiro's eyebrows stood up, impressed with the brevity of her answer. He could see that she was angry, not because she had been called to the school on her day off, but because she hadn't been told why she was here. Mr. Yamashiro chuckled sympathetically.
先生、これが笑い話ならそろそろ帰っていいでしょうか？
いや、ごめん謝るよ。冗談じゃなくて真面目な話なんだ。
Okay, I didn't think she'd have this kind of character. I know nothing about her, but I love her manners.
本当に転入生の問題で。
It's like you see that hairstyle on her and it's like, oh, she's gonna be like a ditzy girl.
彼、宗十郎くんと言うんだけど、ちょっといろいろとずれていてね。僕らが案内してあげるより、同世代の君の方が適任だと思ったんだ。
Wait, isn't it like just Wait, what? Huh? First off, hi. Second, wow, what? What do you mean? Like just love in general? What? Yeah. It's just so sudden. The first message in chat. Isn't it just like love in general? She threw him an amused look. It was neglected. Of them to be pushing teaching duties on her, but she did wonder how exactly this transfer student was peculiar. Maybe him and this student had behavioral problems or was difficult somehow. A peculiar? She didn't have the slightest idea what that meant.
ずれてるなんてそう使わない表現だけど。
Now, hey, okay, let me explain like demisexual real quick before I get back to the game. Demisexual is basically, I don't feel any like sexual attraction towards like anyone until I get closer to them. It's like somehow like people might like see a person like look at porn, let's say, and be like, oh, that body, like, oh, look at them, they're so hot, in a way of like, yeah, I'd have like sex with them. It's like, and I don't have that. That is what makes me like demisexual. Because like I have to know the person and be close to them to have like any kind of like sexual attraction. You don't hear a teacher call someone that every day. She had her doubts but swept them aside for now. This wasn't the first time to get distracted by more concerns. The fact remained that this conversation was all the peculiar she could handle, and she needed more information. She was already beginning to fantasize about saying no and curling up in her warm bed at home.
一つ質問があります。
何？あ、学年は君と同じ2年生だよ。性格は落ち着きがあって人の話をよく聞くタイプ。裏を返せば覇気がないとも取れるけど、それならそれで付き合いやすいだろ。青崎くんとはクラスは違うけど、きっと仲良くな。
そういったことは本人から直接聞きますし、測ります。
Is this gonna be like, is this character like the first Shiki?
そうではなく、なぜ私なんでしょうか。
Though her tone was still stern, it was clear that she was willing to cooperate. She had decided to put her feelings of dissatisfaction aside and focus on the task at hand. Forcing herself to act empathetic in spite of her self-absorbed nature was something she was used to. Paradoxically, this force of will was also the reason teachers put so much faith in her. To a point. At times, that strength shattered expectation, and on those occasions, they were left with no choice but to treat it like a natural disaster. And weather, natural disaster and weather until it passed. That was how Mr. Yamashiro had to come deal with her as over the past
もう
year.
一度だけ聞きます、山城先生。それで、なぜ私なんでしょうか。
Pressured by a question without a clear yes or no answer, he answered.
それはね、別に青崎くんが先生方に敬遠されているのと同じぐらい信頼されていて、学校のためなら教師も生徒も一緒くたに切って捨てる鉄の生徒会長だからじゃないよ。
それ以外にこんな呼びつけを受ける理由はないと思いますけど。
Her eyes did nothing to hide her disbelief as she glared at him. Strength far beyond that of an ordinary 17-year-old girl, coupled with the youthful beauty of one. Mr. Yamashiro, is it Yamashiro? I think I heard her say Yamashiro. I'm gonna say Yamashiro. Until I hear it again. Mr. Yamashiro let us live a genuine smile, admiring the miraculous balance of qualities.
いや、責務だけでいいなら僕がやってるさ。この人選に関しちゃ、教師や生徒会長といった役職も関係ないよ。なんていうか、こんな頼みを損得抜きで聞いてくれるのは君だけだと思ってね。適任ですからと強く推薦したわけ。
In other words, he knows she wouldn't say no.
山城先生。
Okay, Yamashiro. Okay.
うわ、怖っ。もう睨まない睨まない。言ったろ、僕にはともかく彼には笑顔でって。とまあ納得してくれたならすぐに移動しよう。もうずいぶん待たせてしまっているからね。それと雨の中ご苦労様。帰りはもちろん車で送るよ。
Mr. Yamashiro stood up gracefully. I'm good, thanks, she replied before turning and walking out the faculty room. He had been waiting for about an hour. While he did, the rain shower laddered into a drizzle. His mind wandered as he listened to the sound of the raindrops. The room was filled with neatly arranged rectangular tables. He was the only one there. Quite some time had passed since he had been brought to this room and asked to wait. Even the best behaved student might have grown dissatisfied or anxious with the situation by now. I can't talk today. But the boy stuck to his spot like a scarecrow. I can't read, why? My brain's not working well today. Let me drink some Red Bull to get energy in me. I don't know why I thought streaming, or like especially streaming and reading while sick, was a good idea. I should have just started with Okami, but oh well. He was chilled to the bone. It was the end of November and the low temperature in the morning had marked the start of winter. The room was not much warmer. The heater had been turned on. Either he'd missed the teacher telling him to turn it on or he'd never seen one in his life. He breathed lightly on his freezing fingers as he aimlessly surveyed his surroundings. This dreary place was apparently a meeting room. The other students might have considered it a wonderful place to meet, but to him, it was drab and overly spacious. It was a lifeless place that reminded him of an art cave. Stuck in this cold room with absolutely nothing to do, his mind turned to what they wanted to discuss. Is he the cat? is this who it is? Unable to come up with a solid answer, he returned his attention to the sound of the rain. The rain hardly resembled the rain in the mountains, though he could still recognize it barely. Its smell and sound were harsher, but at the end of the day, rain was still rain. So even in this world, aliens could have something in common with the mountains. That trivial detail perked him up a little. He liked how the town looked soaked in rain. Naturally, he preferred sunny weather, but he liked rain in its own ways. The fog from the rain had soaked off the scent of soil, which reminded him of home. It was at times like these that he was able to numb the anxiety the city gave him. But then he let out a discouraged sigh. How pathetic. He had been here for over 2 weeks and thoughts of his hometown still made him sad. Perhaps feeling that he was being unfair to his new life, he composed himself and continued to wait patiently. As if having a passion for distractions, his attention returned to the sound of the rain once more. Waiting like this didn't seem to be particularly hard for him. He quietly endured the numbing cold and the hour alone with calm, deep breaths. As the saying goes, good things come to those who wait. A strong point of his, or not, he was astonishingly patient. It was certainly helping him out in this moment. She, on the other hand, was livid. The profile of a Stanford student had been explained to her on her way to the meeting room. She was told he had lived his whole life up in the mountains without any electricity. That meant more than half of the civilized society would have been an utter mystery to her.
て絶望的な断絶。戦後どころか戦前の話じゃない。ロビンソンにも程がある。
She had every right to be angry. His village had apparently remained isolated in the mountains for many years. Contact with villages in the foothills of the mountains only occurred once a month or so, which was unfathomable in modern Japan. Although expressways and Japan railways to the old national railways now span the country like arteries, it wasn't entirely impossible for a mountain village like his to exist. But she couldn't imagine how someone born to such circumstances would think or live.
電気がないって村に行き渡っていないだけで公衆電話ぐらいはあったんですよね。
なかったそうだよ。こっちに暮らすようになってまず驚いたのが電話って便利ですねなんて真顔で言われてね。そういえばそうだなぁと再確認させられたぐらいだよ。
She shot a sidelong glare his way as he laughed. It seemed that the naivety of the country boy had cheered up Mr. Yamashiro a bit.
駐在もいないってことか。うちも実家は山奥ですから電気が通っていないのはありえないとは言いませんけど。そいつ学校も知らないんですか？
うん。どんなものかは知っていたそうだけど実際来るのは今日が初めてらしい。それで緊張していたのかな。あまり会話も弾まなかった。ああいうのも野生児っていうのかな。狼に育てられた狼少年みたいな。あ、いや探検隊の話だね。怖いな青崎くん。冗談だって。そう大丈夫。話してみた感じおとなしい子だったから。なんていうか言葉の通じない小動物みたいな感じ。
山城先生、その例え気休めになってませんから。
As she gave her blunt reply, she tried to simulate in her mind what life without electricity would be like. But the thought of it took her sour mood from bad to worse. After all, it was a world she had never known. She could understand why the teachers had given up. She too wanted to give up and return to her warm bed, but her good-for-nothing pride was holding her hostage. Not only did the teachers believe she was up to the task, but she also believed she could do it. It wasn't that easy to go back on her word, no matter how bad things looked after the fact. She walked along the hallways, the rain pattering in the background. The meeting room was already in sight. With a furrowed brow, she fixed her long hair in anticipation of meeting the unknown stranger within. Her elegant strides were like those of a confident general going to a battle.
いや、青崎くん、君を信頼してる僕だけど、念のため確認しておくよ。なんていうか、優しくね。できる。
作り笑いは苦手です。
I keep
一応努力
pressing
してい
X
るつ
by
もりです。
accident. I need to not. Okay, I'm just gonna hold it by like the handle with my whole hand to not press X by accident.
ああ、そうなんだ。それはよかった。いやー、ほんとよかった。青崎くんにも苦手なものってあったんだね。
Similar's shoulders slumped the second they reached the meeting room. As he put his hand on the door, his eyes seemed to say to her, "Be nice, please." This only made her more irritated.
分かってるわよ。愛想が悪いってのは。でも笑顔なんて意識して作るものじゃないんだし。
She's just like me.
だいたいそういうインスタントな人付き合いなら飛び丸の方が向いてるって。
She sighed about her social shortcomings, but then it occurred to her that being called into school on a day off while sleep deprived wasn't anything to smile about anyway. She also thought that the person who was responsible for this mess would be better off attending elementary school. It might not be his fault, but neither was her duty or obligation to do the teacher's work for them. At the very least, they could have used their brains and organized all this on a normal school day, another complaint she wanted to voice later.
いや、というか敵。なんであろうと敵。悪いけど、情状酌量以前に敵。間が悪いのはお互い様っていうか、ほんと、なんでよりにもよってこんな忙しい時に。
Her pounding headache from the lack of sleep had boosted her aggression by 10%. No matter how harmless the guy on the other side of the door may be, anyone who disturbed her sleep was the enemy. And just as she was reaching peak annoyance, Miss Yamashiro opened the door to the meeting room. The room slowly slid into view. She didn't care for formalities. She looked straight ahead and saw into the room, and found herself face to face with a most unusual opponent. Before we go on, let's see from another perspective. Turn back the clock just a little. You don't have to do anything. For some reason, those words are priceless luxury. For others, they are unbearable torture. For the proactive girl, it was definitely the former, though she'd be too suspicious of the motives of anyone giving her such a gift to accept it. For the passive boy, it was definitely the latter, a bitter thorn that made him homesick. Though at this very moment his mind was still distracted with the wait for his face to reveal any discontent. He maintained perfect posture as he stared at the grey sky. He had already waited a whole hour, but figured they must have had their reason for making him wait. As long as he had the sound of the rain to soothe him, he could keep on waiting.
でも、そろそろ9時を過ぎるのか。どうなんだろう。
He had been vaguely keeping track of the time as he listened to the rain. Due to the holiday, the school building was completely silent, except for the patter of the rain on the window. The mood felt as damp as the air. It was then he heard the heavy clatter of footsteps approaching.
忘れられているかと思った。
He could hear two sets of footsteps, one heavier set belonging to an adult. He breathed a sigh of relief as the door slid open.
すまないね。随分とお待たせしちゃって。
The first person he saw was a man wearing glasses and an awkward smile. this must be, I'm sure, the one who brought me here.
で、あれ里中先生いないんですか？ひどいなあ。話し相手になってあげてと言ったのに。
Sam Shear scratched his head, looking increasingly apologetic. And then from behind him, with a tight-lipped expression that made it clear she didn't want to be there, a dark-haired girl with a determined look in her eyes appeared. Sojiro gulped. The sound of the rain on the window faded into nothingness. That's when he knew. That's how it felt when time stood still. Yo, there she is. She blinked quickly a few times as if taken back. Why anyone's guess? Why was anyone's guess? The boy was everything she expected. A naive country boy to look like. However, she felt something she could understand. 'Cause he's that cat. His eyes widened slightly as if taken aback. The reason was obvious. Putting his feelings into words was a different matter altogether, so we will never know exactly what he experienced in that moment. That's when it hit him. He sensed he'd been touched by the hands of destiny.
紹介するよ。彼が転入生の静木宗十郎くん。で、こっちの彼女が静木くんの案内役。うちの生徒会長で休日を押して新しい仲間の案内役を買って出てくれた青崎青子くんだ。
His voice and the sound of the rain seemed distant. This is how they first met. Such was their start, for better or worse. Like the ephemeral beauty of fireworks. By the way, this song is sick. That whole moment was really good. It was commonly believed among the students that Aoki was always in a foul mood. But this gossip was 90% prejudice, as Aoki simply didn't have time to be irritated 24/7. The reality was she simply didn't want to explain herself all the time, and therefore seemed angry about something, obvious or not. The subtle gossip did, however, lead her to the title of one of the school's 7 deadly threats. The remaining 10% of the gossip was right on the mark. Aiko herself often had the feeling that her tendency to feel animosity towards harmless things was akin to what chronic headache sufferer might experience. Today fell under that 10%. For today, her anger was pure. And her childish and selfish display was befitting of her actual age. The meeting room was dimly lit, awash in the colors of the rain. To reduce electricity costs, the school regulations forbid to use the use of lights during the day. This was the setting that 3 of them found themselves in. Her first impression was that his calm demeanor reminded her of a field of wildflowers. In spite of his perfect posture, he seemed subdued and frail. And though describing him as meek would be going too far, at the very least he was passive. Even though his uniform she could see was thinner than average. His dark hair was unkempt, and he came across as a wholly forgettable boy. If she had to look at him in a more positive light, she would describe him as more of a young man than a boy. It was his calm demeanor that made him seem more mature. Was that the cause of Aoko's reasonless reaction? He seemed almost too at home in the meeting room, as she was left with the impression that it was her and the teacher, not this outsider, who were the guests here. She felt an indefinable aggravation building within her, almost as if her right to be here was in question. Aoko felt herself rising her natural defenses.
信じられない。私、今わけもなく怒ってない。
She hated not understanding things, her own emotions in particular. It pained her less than he would imagine for a perfectionist like her, but it still nagged her like a thorn in her side.
いやーほら青崎くん挨拶してあげなくちゃ。
Mr. Yamashira's attempt to relieve the tension was equally irritating.
挨拶
After casting a nasty glance at the teacher's direction, Aoko turned to face the boy. From an outsider's perspective, might have looked like a stare down. For a second, I thought, oh, it might have looked like a smackdown, and I was like, oh shit, are they going into it? And in that instant, the culmination of her emotional state hurled her towards the innocent boy and skewered him.
いや待たせたねしずきくん。
Hearing his name, Sojo came to his senses. His stunned gaze shook loose. He took a deep breath to clear his head. Chalking up to the nerves, Mr. Yamashiro broke out with a smile and turned to the girl standing beside him.
紹介するよ。彼が転入生のしずき宗十郎くん。
Yeah, that is like how I'd look after someone waking me up by like ringing my fucking phone as I'm trying to go to bed.
で、こっちの彼女がしずきくんの案内役。うちの生徒会長で休日を押して新しい仲間の案内役を買って出てくれた青崎青子くんだ。
Having been introduced by Mr. Yamashiro, the girl took a step forward. Her eyes were merciless. Her stare, an unspoken threat to violently trample her opponent. Sojo, on the other hand, managed to keep his own composure, despite the shock at how confrontational she appeared. He had never been treated quite like this before, but supposed, mistakenly, this was how people treated each other in the city. The exchange must have looked quite dramatic to an onlooker. A girl ready to brawl, and an earnest country boy desperate to understand. It was a murderous limbo, especially for anyone in the room with them. Like Mr. Yamashiro, for example. He had thought he had made the right decision in choosing an honor student to help him out. She was in an inexplicably bad mood, and the tension in the air was undeniable. It was this moment that he realized his failure. His realization had come far too late. One false move and this girl, for whom no problem was too large, would becoming a storm that would rock the very foundation of the school. Just as the almighty Joker card could bring either fortune or disaster, the sole teacher who had been present at the time would come to bear the blame for the scandal that ensued.
イケてる。二人とも気は合うようだね。
I really wanted to just be like, hey, just like walk up and punch. Wow, you two seem to really hit it off.
僕はこの辺でいいかな。
Mr. Yamashiro laughed nervously as he crept towards the
僕は職員
towards
室
the
にいるか
door.
ら終わったら来るように。いいかい青崎くん。くれ。なんていうか生徒会長としての度量の広さをこの際僕に信じさせてほしいかな。
Mr. Yamashiro left, leaving the two in a locked-eyed state, one in which one in which one set of eyes was doing all the glaring. All that remained in the room was a naive boy and a cross-armed guarded girl. The two lingered in silence. They resembled shogi players agonizing over their first move, though ultimately it was only Ako that had considered the scene that carefully. She decided to put her irritation aside for the time being. With no reason to feel revulsion for him in the first place, she sighed deeply and faced Sojiro.
まあいいわ。山城先生がヒルアンドンなのは今に始まったことじゃないし。それで、あなた名前は？
Her tone was nothing if not reproachful, though he had done nothing to offend her. But the boy failed to pick up on it. Incapable of such venom himself.
ああ、静木宗十郎かな。君は青崎さんだったね。
For whatever reason, he came across as happy as his response.
さんはいいわ。柄じゃないから。こっちは静木くんでいい？
いいって何が？
だから呼び方。くんづけでいいかって聞いてるの。何よ？おかしなこと言った？私。
いや、すごく。
The boy replied immediately as if it was a natural response, but quickly second-guessed himself.
いや、いいんだ。ごく一般的なんだろう。
So how can someone... Oh, hey. These are here.
いや、いいんだ。
Oh, okay, good.
静木くんで頼む。君は青崎でいいんだよな。
Just wanted to see what controls in case I miss a line.
よろしく。
She followed her blunt reply with a swift turn away from him. While she was hardly thrilled at the prospect of the task at hand that had been entrusted to her, it was her personal policy to see through to the end.
悪いけど、優しくしてあげる気はないから。時間も惜しいし、手早く行くわよ。
それは助かる。やっぱり時間は大切だ。
Alko's blunt rancor was lost on him once again. That's a good sprite. Humans tend to be overly conscious about being ignored, whatever form that takes. But despite being peeved at landing not for her attacks, Alko did her best to act professional and directed her guest into the hallway. There was no sunlight in the hallway, nor any sign of life. This was more of a prison than a cave that was the meeting room. As it dawned on Alko that the hallway matched her mood, and she sighed once again.
まず聞いておくけど、山城先生から聞いたことは理解してる？
ああ、学校の仕組みについては分かった。この建物全部に同い年の人間がいるなんて、ちょっと想像できないけど。
そう、よかったわね。
Alko rubbed her forehead. This soldier kid had no idea what he was in for. Apparently all he'd heard about school was that it was a place where a lot of people met to study. High school teachers imparted to students their knowledge in various fields of study while fostering disciplines and creativity. But never did Alko imagine that she would have to explain the concept of school itself to someone. Yes, fundamentals were important, but this was absurd. She had serious doubts whether he could even handle classes, but Mr. Yamashiro insisted that things would work out somehow. Sojiro had managed to pass the transfer exam, after all. Barely.
ま、私には関係ないけど。
Alko grumbled mentally as she walked down the hallway. She consoled herself with the fact that today would be the only day she spent with this boy out of time. Or at least she tried to keep it that way.
青崎、
何？
こっちも一つ聞いていいかな。
だから何？
俺の気のせいだと思うんだが、君はまるで何かを睨んでいるように見える。やはり今朝は悪いものでも。
His gaze revealed an inner concern as if asking her if she'd remembered to eat breakfast. This is already a great dynamic. I like this. There's like another hammer to her head. It was true that Akko had been glaring at Soldier the entire time. Glaring wet-hot daggers, in fact. Not just at him, but the universe. Even though on her best days, her roommate would used to remark,
青子の視線は普通の人には厳しいわ。もう少し多くのことに寛大になるべきね。
she'd be warned that her emotions were so naked on her face that people treated her like a like a powder keg. How naive could the boy be to not pick up on this?
私をバカにしてるってわけじゃなさそうよね。この場合。
Even she found her own attempt to reassure herself unconvincing. It began to dawn on Naoko far too late that compared to her, this laid-back transfer student might as well have been from another planet.
いいわ。言葉にしないとわからないようだから言うけど、あなたの気のせいじゃなくて、私は視線で遠回しに感情を表現してたの。いちいち声に出すのも会話にするのも面倒だから。
In response to her words, the Martian clapped his hands
な
together.
るほど。どうしてそうしたいのかはわからないが、確かにそっちの方が手っ取り早い意思表現だ。
Soldier accepted her reasoning without an argument, though he still had no idea what kind of emotions she was trying to express. It was as if he could hear the word, but didn't grasp the meaning. Ideas that should have connected were instead separated into blocks.
確かにずれてるわ、こいつ。
Miss Amishira's words made sense to her now. What was odd about this boy went beyond naivety. A stranger in a stranger land, he may be, but was only civilized to forgive him some jet-lag-induced confusion.
じゃ、とりあえずあなたの教室に行くから。
She had regained her composure. Soldier raised his hand and stopped in his tracks.
あと一つ。
Alka waited for Soldier to continue. The boy was patient to a fault. She rubbed her forehead with her hand, nursing a vague feeling of uneasiness.
これもちょっとした疑問なんだが、なんで君は怒ってるんだ？怒るのが商売とか、そういう家柄の人なのか？
A long silence. Though she knew it wouldn't change the situation, she remembered her regret at answering the phone that morning. He meant no harm. She repeated this like a mantra in an attempt to keep her impulses in check.
別にあなたのせいじゃないから気にする必要はないわ。ただ、この一瞬とお昼まで眠っていた場合を計りにかけたら、あまりに利益の違いがあって頭を抱えただけよ。
With that vague answer, she started to walk again, and turned her gaze away from this rude stranger named Soldier Shizuki. While what had constitutes normal is certainly up for debate, most would undoubtedly refer to him as so. He was a simple and nice boy with nondescript features. Nondescript features, yeah, there we go. If he were an ice cream flavor, he would be vanilla. Oh, I'd love them to describe everyone. Like every character that appears, they just have a line to describe what kind of flavor they'd be. Soldier found Alka to be very businesslike and full of life. There was a certain purpose to her movements as they began and ended in orderly fashion. The way her finger raised when she pointed at things. The way she made her way across the hallway and classroom. The way she would occasionally glance back at him to make sure he was keeping pace. Each and every movement was so impressive that he couldn't take his eyes off her. Alko showed him to his homeroom class C of the 11th grade. The room certainly displayed more of a human touch than the previous meeting room, but Soldier was none the wiser to its function. Alko gave a brief explanation before they visited individual subject classrooms as well as the gym, cafeteria, locker room, and school infirmary. Soldier asked so many questions that much time passed before they reached the AV room on the second floor.
まずいな。
Sergio stopped looking genuinely
あと
concerned.
20分経つと1時だ。
嘘でしょ。うちの校舎そんな広くないわよ。
The tour had begun around 10, which meant that 3 hours had passed. A tour of a school shouldn't take anywhere near this long.
そうだったわね。行く先々で根掘り葉掘り聞かれちゃ、そりゃ何時間でも経つわ。
I'll calculate as Soldier. She was being sarcastic, of course, knowing full well he would never pick up on it. To his surprise, he looked down apologetically, unable to hide his
なんだこいつ
dejection.
ちゃんとしてるっちゃ。
The guy before her now was nothing like earlier. In contrast to seeing his once impenetrable impenetrable veneer when they first met, she found herself feeling sympathetic. Momentarily at least, until her irritations returned in full force.
で、何がまずいの？覚えることが多すぎてパンクしたなんて言わないでね。
いや、それもあるけど、学校のことは別にして1時になるとまずいんだ。
Sergio's gate wondered as if worried about something. If he was worried about the weather, he would have a hard time seeing as if there was no window in this hallway.
へえ、時間を気にするってことは用事があるのね。そう。人の予定を引っかき回しておいて、自分だけ好きなようにやろうって言うんだ。なんだ、顔に似合わずいい人ね、君。
褒めても何も出ないぞ。
誰も褒めちゃいないわよ。
She yelled at him, unable to hold back her fury.
で、
それで一体何の用なの？
Soldier's face lit up as he finally understood what she was
そ
asking
こは
him.
秘密にしておきたい。
He said with a perfectly straight face.
始めたつもりだったけど、こいつのこういったテンポに失神。
Okay, I love the art in this game. The art is really good. Her frustrations was natural. Still, she did everything she could to stifle her feelings and fake a smile.
しずきくん？
She took a step forward.
秘密だってば。
Feeling the mood change drastically, Soldier took a step back. At another. No matter how many steps he took back, she kept edging towards him. She was smiling, but he thought he could see the blood boiling beneath her skin.
これ最後の質問にしとくわね。あなた、私をからかって楽しい？
He had no intention of mocking her, though at this one he doubted presenting any evidence to prove this would do much to erase that forced smile on her face.
説明する。
His arms raised in surrender. She halted her advance and freed her face from that unseemly smile.
実は1時からアルバイトがあるんだ。でもここはそういうの禁止なんだろ？
そうだけど、あ、禁止されてるから秘密にしようと思ったの？バカね。それなら許可さえ下りていれば問題ないわよ。
知ってる。試験の時に許可をもらってる。
へえ。
Alka's face lit up as she realized he might not be a piece of work she thought him to be.
しかし、
Yeah.
許可は一つしかもらえなかった。
一つって、あなた掛け持ちでバイトしてるの？
これでも2件減らしたんだ。生活費だけで大変なのに学費まで稼がなくちゃいけない。なのに働き先は一つだけというのはあんまりだと思わないか。
いや、あんまりなのはあなたの方だと思うけど。
Though so irritated, her opinion of him changed a little. She was impressed the fact he was able to take care of his tuition and living expenses all on his own. She could also empathize with having no time to oneself. Her anger began to subside. The worst parts on Job were about the last things she had ever expected to hear out of this country's boy mouth.
そういうことなら仕方ないわね。いいわ、行きなさいよ。事情は分かったから。
青崎はいいのか？
She had no idea what his question meant, but she at least understood he was trying to be considerate. Which also took her by surprise. She'd figured he'd just be as dense about people as he was about everything else.
別に、私もこのまま帰るから。
First, though, she thought it'd be best if they both stopped by the faculty room. Shimashiro had mentioned that the transfer procedures had already been completed, so all that remained was for him to sign off on her duties.
先生、案内終わりました。
それはお疲れ様。しずきくんもお疲れ様。それで校舎を回った感想はどうかな？
ありがとうございます。なんというか、とても学校ですね。
そうかそうか。うん、明日から頑張りなさい。
She had no interest whatsoever in this pointless wrap-up meeting.
山城先生のことは気にしないでいいわ。教え子に厄介なことを押し付けてふんぞり返っているぐらい職員室が好きなんだから、何時間でも待ってるでしょ。いえ、待ってるべきじゃない？
そうか。青崎がいいんならいいんだな。
ん？
There it was again. Whatever Soldier was getting at, Oko had no idea.
それじゃあ行くよ。今日はありがとう。
今日だけよ、今日だけ。
She shooed him away with her hand. His face bent to a broad smile as if he had found the gestures endearing. It was a soft expression that she had grown accustomed to seeing out of him. It was the kind of smile that would make anyone smile back. Well, most people at least. Aoko Aozaki didn't betray the slightest hint of a smile.
それじゃあまた。
And with that friendly farewell, Soldier walked towards the end of the hallway. Or so she thought before he turned into the next class over. Soldier headed straight for one of the classroom's windows, whereupon he opened it with ease. The chilly November air filled the room as the soft sound of wind doubled in volume. In that instant, she realized his intention with opening the window. She really wished she hadn't.
いや、待て待て待て！
He already had one leg out the window when she dashed to stop him.
何するつもりよ、あんたは！
何って、アルバイトに行くんだけど。
その窓は人が出入りするところじゃないの。だいたいここ何階だと思ってるの？
She saw the light of understanding dawn in his eyes.
死ぬところだった。2階から降りたら早すぎる。
Oh yeah, I love him. Such just a good character.
危ないのはあんたの頭。
Her insult went right over his head.
あのね、こっちじゃ窓から人は出入りしないの。さっき言っとくべきだった。
知ってるよ。時間がないんで慌ててたんだ。ありがとう。これからは気をつける。
He pulled his leg back inside and closed the window. His school uniform was soaking wet from the rain.
いいけど、私は別に。あなたがどこから外に出ようが関係ないもの。ただ、できれば私の前ではやらないでほしいだけよ。それより、あなた、本当に明日から学校に来るの？
来るよ。不安だけど案内してもらったし。
He bid her farewell before running away down the hallway. She had hoped he would walk down the stairs and leave through the school entrance like a normal person.
大丈夫なのかあんなんで。
The image of him disappearing into the distance popped into her head in spite of her ear. Or ire. She had no intention of spending any more time with him, and yet she felt strangely anxious. She couldn't tell if the feeling was fueled by concern or irritation. Why she had even gotten angry with this insignificant transfer student in the first place. A strange day with a strange transfer student resulting in strange emotions. Her head tilted as she reflected what should have been more enjoyable day than irritating experience she just had.
いっか。
I want to see. Oh, would this be better for me to read from? Wait.
どうせこれっきりなんだし。
The sound of the rain echoed quietly around her. The grey sky seemed frozen in time. It was impossible to discern whether it was morning or evening. Mr. Yamashiro and Aoko were likely the only ones left at school. The unlit classroom looked overly gloomy and ominous as Aoko stood in it alone. She pulled up her left sleeve. Her dainty and remarkable wash. My throat is. I need more tea. Showed that it was almost 1 o'clock.
時間合ってる。
She looked out the window at the grounds below. She saw a boy in uniform running through the rain without an umbrella. A sight she must have seen before, but for whatever reason, affected her far more than she wished. Aoko did not stop by the faculty room before heading home. While Mr. Yamashiro offered to drive her home was tempting, she decided it would ultimately be far more satisfying to ruin his day just as he had hers. She walked as quietly as she could towards the entrance and opened her bright red umbrella. As she had projected that morning, the rain was waning in the afternoon. But at this rate, it would probably cease completely in an hour or so. That distant sunshine would likely have reached her by the time she arrived home.
ま、それも悪くないか。
Okay, no, that didn't make it better. She shrugged her shoulder in resignation. She neither liked nor disliked the rain, but she found herself enjoying her walk home with her red umbrella in hand. The teachers at Misaki High School weren't fond of bright colors, so Aoko's red umbrella was an unusual sight. Sorry. A ghost story about how the umbrella was once pure white had been making the rounds, but it featured Aoko instead of a ghost. It was with that umbrella that she made her way towards Misaki Station. The private Misaki High School got its name from the town of the same name. The area was once a sprawl of farmland and woodland, but rapid growth over the last 10 years had led to unprecedented modernization. There were some who fought to preserve Misaki's natural treasures.
残すことには賛成ですが、それでは残すだけになってしまうでしょう。
I realized that I can say a lot of these words in a sentence like if they just came up to me, but having to read them out loud and seeing how they are written, my brain's just like, how do I do this? More than enough funds for the urban development were collected, and the unassuming town of Misaki became the largest municipality in the Misaki city in merely 10 years. Even though it lacked the modernity of neighboring Yashirogi and the elegance of Misaki Hills.
それも当然よね。どういじくっても、もともとが山中の宿場町だし。
Urbanization had been contained to the lowlands around the station, with most of the hills and mountains still standing as they did 10 years prior. The exhaustion of funds succeeded in protecting the old Misaki where the citizens could not. It became truly old suburban town, welcoming an increasingly urban population with its vestiges of old century charm. Misaki High School was a private school established long before the town's current state. The original campus, built 50 years ago, was located high up in the mountains, making its current location its second incarnation. The path to the old grounds were remote and steep, and also well trodden by animals. For these reasons, among others, Misaki High School had been shuttered until almost 20 years ago, when it received a donation from a department store chain that allowed it for construction of a new campus in the city, and thus Misaki High School reopened its door, the old Woodlands campus forgotten. In fact, most of the students attending Misaki High School were not from Misaki at all. The haughty, rustic people of this country town preferred prefectural schools to private ones. Truth be told, Aoko herself was one of them. All she had wanted after junior high was to move to Tokyo, where she hoped to spend her days enjoying live music on her way to entering a public university. But her hopes were dashed with her sister's departure. So I need to figure out a way to sit down and read, to be able to read without being bothered by the mic. So here she was, walking alone in a town with only a red umbrella to keep her company on what should have been a day off.
思い返してみると、私の人生ってなんか災難続きっぽい。
Her frustrations evaporated into a cold December air.
でもいっか。退屈だけはしないわけだし。
With those words, her mood brightened a bit as she left the school in her wake. The busier part of town met her at the bottom of a gently sloping road. Unique fashion clothes. What does it say? I really want to read that. I don't think I'll be able to. The second train station was brand new. Once looking no prettier than an abandoned factory, it had been renovated into a multi-purpose structure with huge department stores on its east and west sides. When the department stores first opened, Aoko and her friends had been impressed with their modern feel, but in time the stores too became dated. She had no shopping to do today, so she passed them by. What she had really wanted to do was just rest at a cafe, but she fought the urge, knowing her roommate would never let her hear the end of it. She frittered away her money. Zawarudo? She looked back and blinked. For a moment she could have sworn she had seen someone suspicious in a red dress out of the corner of her eye. This must have been in her imagination. The sixth sense chill she was experiencing down her spine was a familiar one at this point. She continued her walk home, brushing off an event as if it never happened. In time, the chill faded and all that was ever left was the sound of the town. She sighed happily. Had she imagined it? Even if it had all been in her head, she was far from comfortable with the feeling that still lingered.
夏場の方ってもう少しこう。
She grumbled under her breath.
波乱万丈、商売繁盛、諸行無常と。そうそう、忙しさに愚痴を言っても始まらないわ。
Unfortunately, summer and bugs go hand in hand. She could see how bugs could be drawn to all sweet fruit. And I can already see myself getting slightly better as I continue reading, so give me a month and I'll be back to my old level of reading out loud. Let me just finish this bottle. Yo. No, this is a fucking vibe. I need to get the name of this song because this is a great intro song. I'll just have a friend pull it up for me because I don't want to get spoiled. Rank with grease and heat, the kitchen was closed for the time being. The lunch rush had come and gone, but one last battle remained, dinner time. Only after the evening chaos could the kitchen crew remove their white armor and call it a day. In the midst of a war zone was a lone newcomer.
これ着るんですか?
His voice was uneasy, betraying how new he was.
気持ちはわかる。俺もどうかと思うけど、店長の言うことだから、もう笑顔で乗り越えてくれ。これも商店街の明日のためなんだとよ。本気で申し訳ないんだが、雨も止んだし、なんとか行ってきてくれないか。無事帰ってきたら晩飯おごってやっから。
His bright orange co-worker clasped his hands together as if to beg for forgiveness as he saddled him with this unreasonable task. "10 years ago, Misaki City was a town of farm and woodland. But everything had changed. The front of the station was now lined with tall multi-story buildings, and the residential area was suddenly full of apartment complexes. That once again rustic scenery around the station had long become a thing of the past." Let's see, Shiro Nizuka was the only place in the city that still contained vestiges of the old town, a pocket of the past inside an urban jungle. The road extended up a conceptually high hill to an old residential district far from the hustle and bustle of the train station. Long ago, it had been considered unwise to build on high ground, so nobody lived above a certain elevation. Shiro Nizuka, sitting as it did atop a hill in the middle of the town, was no exception to that convention, had no residence to speak of. The asphalt continued for some time, eventually giving way to a mountain. To a mountain road that was swallowed into the cover of trees. A lone vending machine stood to mark the boundary between town and the beyond. Even the children knew there was nothing beyond the new playground development that so enthralled them. Well, that was not entirely true. There was nothing besides the haunted house. Now Kazuki traversed the long slope. Below her she could see a whole Misaki. The symmetrical town looked like a miniature set from this height. It would look like a painting if there had ever been a sea next to it, but, unfortunately, Misaki City was very much landlocked. While it was overcast at the moment, the scene was quite breathtaking on clear evenings. The view was the one thing that made the arduous climb worthwhile, and today, she had been denied even that.
雨の日は自転車も使えないし、1日に2回ぐらいバスでも通ってくれないもんかな、ほんと。
Aoki had been using this road to get to school for almost 2 years now, but the journey had never gotten easier.
あれ、鍵閉まったまま？アリス、まだ帰ってきてないんだ。
With a weary shrug, she put her hand on a rusty iron fence. Quietly, the heavy gate swung open as if to welcome her home. Back here. There sits atop the hill a haunted house. That's how the story much shared around the town used to begin. But fresh rumor about the house had sprung to life almost as if almost as fast as the town's modernization. Despite being dilapidated and abandoned for many years, lights can still be seen inside the house at night. An angry murder of crows often gather atop the hill before mysteriously vanishing. Children get lost in the fog, never to be seen again. Late at night, a shrieking sound can be heard all the way to town. This particular piece of slander was the one Alka wished to discredit the most. The final rumor was of an eye-catching luxury car that sometimes made its way up and down the hill. The rumors spread and grew by the day, and while they grew, the house that everyone thought had rotted away was restored over the recent years. Deep in a wood on top of a hill, no one dared to approach. Like a ruin shrouded from view even on the brightest of days, stood a relic out of time, a building from a fairy tale, the house. Was the Kionji mansion. Kionji. Is it Kionji? Kionji. It's Kionji? Is that it? Kionji mansion? Everyone in town knew about the witch's house on the hill. The unbashedly haunted house where Aoka Ozaki resided for reasons unknown. Needless to say, was not really haunted. The Kionji family home was a grand western-style mansion with a long a storied history stretching all the way back to England. My voice is starting to give up. It was too small to be a dormitory, yet too big to be called a house. The main building contained as many as 3 normal houses worth of rooms and was surrounded by a large all-encompassing courtyard. The perimeter of the grounds was surrounded by a high iron fence covered in thorny vines. There was also an annex to the main building. Given such extravagance, it was no wonder that inspired rumors. To the town's residents, the mere existence of such lavish and out-of-place mansion on top of the hill was a cause for suspicion. Rumors, lies, slanders were the prices to be paid for fame. With only 2 lodges, it was hard to disagree with that perception that vampires must be living here.
ま、私はともかく、アリスはそういうのやりかねないし。
She put her hand on the front door. It was a grand double door that would have paired well with the brass lock, and yet it was secured with little more than a simple keyhole. Pushing it open with one hand, she entered the supposedly haunted house. And by the way, if vampires were not enough to scare you, ghosts were known to appear on Saturday nights. Wait, am I living with a vampire? Much like the weather outside, the foyer was overcast with shades of grey. Perhaps by deliberate design, the architect had chosen not to include any lights in the entrance area. The ceiling was 2 floors high. The only light in the room came from the skylight. It was particularly gloomy on rainy days. On moonless nights, it was like the world itself ceased to be. Alka decided the drawing room to the east would be a good place to rest, but knowing that she would not be able to relax until she changed clothes, she started up the stairs. The stairs cooled up the wall to the 2nd floor hall. There was a 3rd floor attic as well, accessible from the far end of the hall. She had never set foot in there in the 2 years she had lived here, though. The Kionji Manor was more or less divided into 2 wings, east and west. Alka had been given the entire east wing, but the 2 rooms were more than enough as far as she was concerned. She had no desire to open the door that would trap you in the storybook world, or lead an attic that would only be used for storage these last 5 years. Aoki's room at the end of the east wing's that long corridor. She had elected for a smaller room for no other reason other than that she thought it would be easier to clean. It was furnished with a large bed, her beloved mahogany desk, and a wardrobe and a chest for her clothes, and 2 9-shelf bookcases. That's all she brought with her from home. Her entire life of 16 years reduced to this. She boarded the next room down for her own purposes.
そうだ。アリスにもらった見張りと壊れてないかチェックしないと。
I'm gonna stop once like I had 2 hours or maybe like finish the chapter. I don't know how long the chapter is. Because I'm feeling my throat giving out. She needed to see if the project she had been working on all night had borne fruit. The study next door served as proof of the life she had been living for the last year and how different that life was from the one she had lived before. It was not a room for the person she had been. It was a room for the person she would eventually become. A place of solitude that only she could enter. Or so she thought.
うわ、壊れてるどころか跡形もなく消え去ってる。やっぱ自己流アレンジはまだ早かったか。いいわよ。笑いなさいよ、コマドリ。
Burb. The noisy neighbor that had interrupted her upon her sanctuary flew away. While not exceptionally talented, Aoko did not lack for effort and was not afraid to fail. One could have almost mistaken her approach for optimism. She changed out of her uniform and returned to the first floor. Down the stairs, she opened the door to the east wing into the corridor, as dark as a cellar. The absence of windows meant it was pitch black without lights on, so she flicked a switch and entered the nearby doorway. Oh my god, I love Sani TVs. Life without electricity, I don't even imagine it. It had been her idea to update the drawing room. The walls were decorated with extravagant patterns. And around the room were large, majestic sofas and a luxurious Persian rug. Oh, I love me a Persian rug. And amidst it was all 30-inch television that seemed completely out of place. It stood looking over the other furniture like the emperor with no clothes. The mansion owner would have rather done without it, but so commodore like Hauko was an essential commodity. They had fought over its presence at first, but eventually came to an agreement and now mutually enjoyed this modern comfort.
なんだ、人のことは言えないか。うちも案外時代錯誤な家だった。
Now in a somewhat pleasant mood, she decided to brew some tea. She pulled some water in the kitchen, prepared a teapot, and made herself some black tea. Oh, I should make myself some black tea. Sounds nice. With a flop, she sank into the sofa. She took a sip of her tea, then another. Lulled by the ticking of the clock, she took a third sip as she pondered how to spend her afternoon. The sofa almost seemed to be inviting her, and she sunk even further into its comforting embrace. Oh, hi. Alko blearily opened her eyes as she lifted her body up from the cushions. Getting sure, Alice? This was no dream or delusion. At some point, a girl had sat down across from her. Not in the least bit surprised, she reached out for her teacup, but the tea would then had completely gone cold. She asked the question to the girl on the other side of the table. The girl answered without lifting her gaze. When silent, she could have been mistaken for a beautiful doll. The girl sitting in the opposite sofa was reading an old book. She had delicate limbs and pale white skin. Not a hint of humanity emanated from her melancholic aura. She had darker hair than Alko, and her icy eyes were focused on the pages in front of her. Her clothes resembled that of a nun, but were actually her school uniform. In Alko's humble opinion, the gloominess suited her. She evoked something like out of a painting. Just had tea on and cough a bit. There was something unreal about her, as if she was frozen in time. The white of her neck was so lovely that even Alka found herself enchanted by it. The girl was one of the haunted house 2 residents. Her name was Alice Konoji, or Alice Kunji. She was the same age as Alko.
私どれくらい寝てた
？1時間と少し。ここで眠ると風邪ひくわよ。
Alice answered indifferently, not that it bothered Alko, who was now used to it. She looked at the clock on the wall and saw that it was already 7. She had been asleep for 2 hours. The day had been a rough one for her, and she had slept little the night before. So it was no surprise that she had dozed off for as long as she had.
起こしてくれてもよかったのに、せっかくの紅茶が冷めちゃったじゃない。
私が来た時はもう冷めてたわ。
でしょうね。行ってみただけよ。
Alko drank down the rest of the cold tea in one gulp. In the poorly heated Kunoji mansion, that was more than enough to clear her head and wake
こうな
Oh,
up.
ると、フォートナム&メイソンも何もないわね。
I love the design and like
Alice.
it's so
玉
cute.
の贅沢もあんた抜きじゃ閉まらないってことかしら。今日は薬日か天中殺か。ちょっと早いけど、お参りってのも十分ありかもね。
Alka shrugged her shoulders as if resigning herself to her fate.
それで何があったの？
After 2 years together, they knew each other quite well. Alka had one way of asking questions, and Alice had another. Alice asked without raising her head, and Alka gave her the details.
まず謝らなくちゃいけない。昨日徹夜で完成させた例のあれ、意味がなくなっちゃったのよ。ちょっと目を離した隙に沸騰しすぎて壊れちゃったみたい。そうならないよう循環のコードを 2,3 本外したり縫合したりしたんだけど。
どういうこと？
今朝休養が入って学校に呼び出し受けたの。そこで転入生の世話を押し付けられて1日が無残にも消費されちゃって、帰ってきたら跡形もなく消えてました。怒る？アリス。
別に青子の器物破損にいちいち怒っていたら一生分の口論をすることになるでしょ。代用品はあるからまた一から始めればいいわ。それより怒ってるのはあなたの方じゃないの
Alice was very much on point today. It was true that despite outward appearance, Alka was seething with frustration. That aside,
この転入生っていうのがひどくずれててね。すごい山奥で暮らしてたらしくて、こっちの常識が通じないんだから。三問以下って言葉があるけど、あれって本当のことなのね、アリス。
Alice raised her head in response to hearing her name. But Aoka kept going on before she could get a word in edgewise. Aoka, after all, expected no sympathy in the first place.
初対面から尺に触るやつだったけど、教室を案内した時なんか失神しそうになったわ。そいつ、教室で教師と1対1で授業を受けるもんだと思ってたらしいの。ええ、それはそれでまだ流せる。で、私が簡潔かつ丁寧に教室の何たるかを教えた後で、そいつなんて言ったと思う？それで青崎、他の教室は何に使うんだ？ですって。教室に他も何もないでしょ？なんていうか、そいつは少しでも説明を怠るとそのままで何も疑問に思わないというか、想像力が欠如してるっていうか、想像することに慣れてないっていうか。まあ一度言ったことはちゃんと分かってるっぽいからバカってわけじゃないんだけど。
あなたが人を批評するのは珍しいわね。そういうダメな人気にするたちだったの？
みじんたりとも気にしないわよ。けど明日からどんな間違いをしでかすのかちょっと心配なだけ。
What she really was worried about was having to clean up that mess, if and when it happened. That had to be it. If not, it would mean she had no idea why she would not get him out of her head.
とにかく変なやつなの。案外アリスと気が合うかも。
三問一回はいい言葉ね。
But from her eyes was clear that the question of whether they would get along was irrelevant, given that they would never meet in the first place. Alka gave a non-committal response.
ところでアリス、さっきから何読んでるの？
霊的進化論の二次創作、スピリチュアルダイアリのまがいもの。
ああ、スウェーデンボリー。そんなの今更読んでも仕方ないんじゃない？
新書なら退屈だけど、これは義書だから。彼の欠点と長所を劇的に褒め上げている。よくできた冒険小説のようよ。筆跡は
God damn it!
あなたのおじいさんのものだ。
I should just put down the controller.
へえ、あの人そういう趣味まであったんだ。割とユーモアがあったのね。惜しい人を亡くしたわ。
Alka seemed nostalgic over her now deceased
あな
grandfather.
たのおじいさん、夏に頼りをくれたけど。
よしてよ、死んだものと考えたいのに。
Alka sat and laid back on the sofa. The soft cushions caved in under her weight.
話は戻るけど、
Alice shot a glance at Alka. Her body buried in the sofa remained as still as a corpse. It was clear Alka had tuned out the conversation. Alice sadly chastised her with a look. The more she thought about it, the less important the events of today seemed to become. If she had ignored Alice, the conversation would end there. They would eventually get up and leave today's mistake and resolve for another day. However, that's not the kind of person Aozaki was.
いいわよ。何？
She still asked, lying down.
今日できなかったのは少し痛いわね。
だから反省してるって。学校優先は一人前になってからでしょ。
ならいいけど。
I know the story's called Witch on the Holy Night. Or Holy whatever the fuck it's called. And I know about Nazu's shit. It's I've seen Fate before. But I'm still like, what the fuck is the very first story that NASA has ever wrote this like? Does it become as insane as like Fate? The coldness in her voice made Alco gnash her teeth. She knew what Alice wanted to say. She knew better than anyone. The veneer she wore for school was different than the one she lived at home. While it could be called hiding in plain sight, Alice thought it was silly. And what was the silence told her was? What the silence told her was... Today's failure was not a colossal one. She just happened to upset the delicate balance between her home and school lives, chasing one at the expense of the other. And yet, that careless mistake was a clear sign of Alco's lack of commitment.
Alice は関係ない。これは私が私で決めなくちゃいけないこと。
She had only known for sure for the last year and a half. But she had had a hunch for as long as she could remember. Make the choice, and the day will come. It was a little wonder that made her morals and consciousness had been stripped away. Alco pushed herself back up. She was met by Alice's cold beauty and wordless gaze.
Okay, Alice. 来週中に決着をつけよう。それでいいんでしょ？
ええ、青子がいいなら。
Alka could not help but shake her head, feeling like she was hearing something similar for the second time that day. Even in the comfort of her home, even in the comfort of her own, she couldn't banish thoughts of that country boy from her mind.
じゃあ下準備はよろしくね。私まだできないし。
場所は例の公園でいい？
妥当な線ね。あ、でももう一軒の方は？そっちの方が急務じゃない？
時と場合、森に変化があれば教えるわ。
After that brief exchange, Alice returned her attention to the book in her lap. Shop talk was over. Now they could return to their normal relationship as roommates. Alka grabbed the remote and turned on the TV. Since Alice was busy reading, Alka decided to tune in to a variety show that had already started. Alice started to speak, but suddenly cut herself off. One of her delicate hands raised to her mouth. She would always cut herself the second she realized she was about to say something trivial. Sometimes her self-restraint would hit too late, and she would make a gesture like the one she was making now. It occurred to Alka that the sound her cute little roommate made just now was different than the "wa" she'd learned in times past.
何？
Alka turned down the volume of the TV. Her intense eyes lit up like those of a mischievous cat.
どうということはないんだけど。
ないんだけど？
Oh, they took it. Alice looked away bashfully, not knowing if she could bring it up or not. It was times like these that her expression carried a real warmth and surprising charm. If you could see her in this moment, Alice's father would have to admit that her name suited her perfectly.
今日帰ってくるときおかしなものを見て誰かに話そうと思っていたんだけど。
Alka nodded, beckoning her to
つ
continue.
まらない。本当に意味のないことよ。けどどう考えてもそんなことをする理由がわからない。青子、人間ぐらいの大きな猫がひょこひょこ出前をする理由ってわかる？
For a second, Alka thought Alice was trying and failing miserably to make a joke again. One would think that about anyone, really. But she seemed completely serious. Even if Alice's sense of humor fell flat for Alka, the story already sounded like more fanciful than Alice's usual attempt at jokes. Alka concluded that her roommate was talking about something that she had actually seen.
その話には2つぐらい信じがたい部分があるけど、1つずつ論破していい？
いいの。 私もからくりぐらいは思いつくから。ただ理由がわからないから聞いてるの。わざわざ精巧な猫のぬいぐるみを着て出前のてんやものを届けに行くことって。
Oh, that's the costume he was talking about. Okay, I get it. I was like, oh, was he like doesn't he get like just like the orange outfit, like for Sojiro? But no, he was wearing a cat outfit. Okay. So I am just imagining. I'm imagining the cat costume as fucking Mishi. Alice nodded attentively at her words.
世の中いろいろあるから、私たちみたいなのもいれば、下界から遮断された山奥で暮らしていたやつまで10人十色よ。私だったら見かけたら声かけて理由を尋ねただろうけど。
Alice's gaze drifted at that.
暮れゆく住宅街にさまよう出前猫か。はい、で、今日の夕飯どうする？せっかく話が出たし、私らもてんやものにしようか。
Alka loved getting takeout and her face glowed as she spoke. They had no hard rules for dinner, but if one of them was in the mood to cook, they made it a point to make it up for two. At the very worst, this meant entire weeks without dinner, but the two of them agreed that this was the system that worked best for them. Whether they found cooking to be too much effort or simply liked ordering out. Nights like this were a common occurrence, much to the jargon. Hey, I learned that word! Of the restaurants of Misaki Town. Delivering to the mansion meant coming all the way up to the top of the hill, the source of their disgruntlement.
時間は8時前。ギリギリセーフね。私今月がいいな。あそこの月見そば最近ご無沙汰だったし。
The hungry student council president took out their many menus and excitedly looked for anything that stood out. Alice casually responded without sparing as much as a glance.
悪いけど、私夕飯済んでるの。
With those words, Alka froze. All deliveries required a minimum of 2 items, so she was out of luck without an accomplice. Cruel society has decided it couldn't be bothered to deliver to a princess who only ordered a single serving of food. Incidentally, to counteract orders from Hilltop Mansion, the restaurants have declared that the minimum number of orders will be 3 starting next year. Alka and Alice were still in the dark to this fiendish change in direction.
この裏切り者だから帰ってくるのが遅かったのね。帰宅部、学校までバス徒歩込みで片道20分のあんたがなんで5時以降に帰ってくんのか考えるべきだったわ。
Unfortunately for Alka, she had been too out of it to remember that she was the one who had fallen asleep.
ああ、ひどい女。そういう時は残された一人のためにお土産買ってくるのが暗黙の了解だったのに。私だってこの前の外食の時はアリスの分も買ってきたじゃない。
It was not how serious Alka was being, but she was visibly angry. She had already woken up hungry that morning, and from the time she was called into school until now she had consumed nothing but tea. It was a small miracle that her stomach was not growling. She knew it was her own fault, but she persisted in wanting to get revenge on Alice for scolding her earlier.
この前ってあれのこと？あなたが都心に出向いた時、夕食にお寿司を食べてきたのに、お土産はなぜかコンビニエンスストアのビニール袋だったって話
？Alka had kicked a hornet's nest.
何よ、買ってこないよりはマシでしょ。
真実は時に隠蔽すべきね。
Alice's icy gaze pierced right through her. Alka had taken across a line by going on and on about how the sushi circled around the restaurant while Alice ate her convenience store meal. But new things fascinated her, and she couldn't contain her curiosity towards the conveyor belt sushi shops that started popping up at the time. They were nothing short of miraculous. Even honesty can be a sin, given the right circumstances.
わかった。わかりました。じゃ
Man,
あ
I'm
今回
hungry
の
for
前
it.
のと帳
Oh,
消しってことでいいわね。
it's 2 a.m. There's nothing to order, but oh, I'm hungry now. Alice went back to her book without so much as recognizing the question. The fact that she did not confirm it made Alko anxious.
仕方ない。今日は薬日だし、おとなしく台所に立って料理の腕を磨くとしましょう。あ、聞き忘れてた。アリス、どこで夕食済ませたの
？Alice's hand froze on her current page. She suddenly shut the book as she was reading and stood up as if it was wit's end. She walked across the drawing room with her book in hand. When she reached the door, she stopped and turned towards Alko.
聞きたい。
まあ、なんとなく。
Alko nodded timidly, cowed by Alice's sudden vigor. Alice continued in her matter-of-fact way.
その猫が余ったメニューをくれたのよ。
And with that brief response, she left the room. Hey. Hey, let's see now. Oh, hey, there we go. Okay, I'm gonna stop now just to let my throat relax, and I need to go to bed. I've been holding it in for like the last 30 minutes. I'll come back after like an hour for Okami. Well, yeah, for now. See ya.